Hello, my name's Dennis Ubaldi, Sales Director of ROC. Today we're here to present our product range. Let's start with our flagship, the RT1000. It's the most popular model, intended for all contractors who produce silage and hay with square balers. In other words, professionals processing large areas, normally on the North American, Russian, and European markets. But first, let's discuss the benefits of mergers, by which I mean the concept, not just our machine, compared to conventional rakes. The first plus factor is that mergers don't drag the crop over the ground. Instead, they load it into a belt and then transport it. The major benefit of this is that we don't lose any crop if we encounter holes or ruts. So, no crop loss. The other big advantage is that we don't pick up soil or stones, and this is very important because not picking up soil or stones means a much cleaner crop, and above all, no wear on the components of the downstream machinery, such as the forage harvester knives, the blower, and the spouts, or in the case of the baler, simply the guides of the baler piston. So, there's much less wear on the machinery that performs the follow-on processes. Another big plus factor is that instead of having, as with normal swathers, just one swath every 9, 10, or 12 meters, we can pick up the swath again and move it to give us one swath every 18, 27, or 36 meters. And this is a great help because people often say, I baled at 16 to 18 kilometers per hour, which is meaningless. Or, I harvested my forage at 15 kilometers an hour, which means nothing. Because in the case of a baler, we have a tractor of 200 or 300 horsepower and a baler that on its own weighs 11 tons. Plus another tractor that weighs another 11 or 10 tons. We're moving 22 or 24 tons at that speed. And how many bales are we baling per hour? What matters when baling is to keep the number of bales per hour high. To do this, we need big swaths. So with a merger, what we're actually doing is reducing the number of swaths in the field, but not the amount of crop per swath compared to the first cuttings. So regardless of whether this is the first, second, third, fourth, or fifth cutting, we always have the maximum amount. So we can keep the baler at 4 or 5 kilometers per hour. This is the secret of always operating it at peak efficiency. There's no point in buying a second or third baler. You just need to get the most out of the one you have. The same applies to forage harvesters. Nowadays, forage harvesters are not like 20 years ago, with just 400 or 500 horsepower. That type's still around, but for contractors, we're already talking about 700 or 800 or even 1,000 horsepower. Obviously, with a 1,000 horsepower machine, the more crop we have, the better. If you look at corn, we've moved from 6 to 8 rows to 8 to 12 rolls. And unfortunately, the pickup is still 3 meters wide for the forage harvester itself. So it's up to us to make sure the forage harvester swath is big enough to keep productivity in tons per hour high. And to do this, sometimes we may even have one swath every 40 meters. But the secret is that the hourly cost of a tractor with a merger is fairly low compared to a forage harvester with an engine of 800 or 900 or 1,000 horsepower. So it's better to do a good job with a professional machine first, to get the most from the more expensive machines that follow. Not to mention crop quality, which we discussed earlier. Now let's talk about our machine's benefits. Starting from the front, we'll take a look at its characteristics. At the front, we have 2 axles with thick chrome plating, like all this machine's axles. We have a vertical axle that enables us to turn the tractor by 190 degrees in relation to the machine, so we can manage even the tightest turns on headlands, in the narrowest or even pointed fields, without ever having to angle the PTO shaft, which will be straight at all times. The horizontal axle, on the other hand, allows dynamic unhitching of the machine's frame from the tractor. Often, a lot of machines have 2 plates that hitch the machine to the 3-point lift linkage. In this case, we have a rocker arm. This means the weight of the machine can be discharged onto a single point, so the machine-tractor coupling is more flexible, with a rotation of 60 degrees. Why am I telling you this? because a lot of machines have a fixed structure with two external arms, but when at work or during on-road transport, often only one of the two tractor linkage arms is carrying the weight, and this applies a torque to the frame which may cause its breakage over the long term, and we've solved that problem. What's more, we can see we have a direct gearbox with a pump divided into three, so each pickup is served by its own pump. As in various points on the machine, every hose already has its article code on both ends of the hose. To give an idea of the machine's build quality, you only have to look at the welds. 95% of the welds are made by robots, and they're perfect, like the assembly itself. All hoses are precise, and so are the hose covers when uncoupled from the tractor. Care is taken over every tiniest detail, and this is a competitive factor for us because we've always believed in perfection. We believe that a product is made up of details and its quality. And we've never wanted our products to be ordinary. We've always wanted ours to be the best. Continuing to examine the machine, here's the drawbar at the front. So the hydraulic oil reaches the pumps along a pipe that passes through the axle to supply each single pump. This is the machine's oil tank. It ranges from 160 to 380 liters depending on the model. Then we come to the structure. Now it's time to consider the pickup. This is in some ways the key element because we've done a lot of work on it. This pickup has various features, one of which, we're talking about the 6 bars now, is its very bent tines. They're one of our patents. This very curved tine shape retains the crop more effectively. But if a stone is picked up, the angle between the strip and the tine is very wide, so the stone tends to slide forward and roll away much more easily than with the tines of other pickups, which tend to collect and retain stones. With this angle, stones slip off and the crop is retained, but still kept away from the strip. For its size, with 6 bars, this pickup is really very compact. It's packed with technology. Another feature of the pickup is that it is split in two. We have a cam at the other end and a cam in the middle. So it's a single pickup, but in terms of cams, actually there are 2. What's more, the bars are mounted not on the usual plastic bushings, but on bearings, in this case by SKF, chrome-plated on the inside. The fact that the bar is bearing-mounted not only means the bearing lasts longer than the bushing, but also avoids wear of the bar, because it rotates on a bearing. We've chrome-plated all the bearings to avoid they rust and get locked on the bar. The strips are flexible. This means that if they hit a stone or another object, they will not be bent like metal ones. The strips are very thick, 12 millimeters, and thanks to the plastic compound, they're very rigid. Unlike other companies, which produce very lightweight strips that tend to bend, and often, some of the crop gets stuck underneath the strip. In our case, this doesn't happen. The strip is very rigid and very wide and stays firmly in place. What's more, they are milled on the inside to make them round like the pickup, while very often with other companies the strip tends to stick out behind the radius of the pickup at the front, and to be outside the pickup radius in the bottom and top. Here, on the other hand, the strip is perfectly shaped to follow the circular path of the tines. The motor is installed outside the pickup. This is a major benefit. If we should need to work on the motor, since it is not on the inside as with many companies where you have to dismantle all the pickups to be able to work on it. We'll only have to remove a cover plate with 8 screws. And once that has been taken off, we can remove the motor itself. And this makes maintenance much, much simpler. The same applies to the cam. So we don't have to dismantle all the pickups in order to change the central cam, because we've created a cam constructed in sections, which can be replaced without removing the rotor. So the waste of time is minimized, and the operation is really quick. When we have to change a whole wall, unlike with other companies which produce it as a single casting, which is very expensive, we can change just a small laser-cut section, which is much cheaper, much lighter to ship, and easier to change, so you don't need very special skills to do it. Here we can clearly see the shape of the tine, which is really very bent, especially on 6-bar pickups, more than on 5-bar ones. We can also see how the rear of the pickup is constructed. This is another of our patents. To prevent jamming with wet and green crops, underneath every strip there's a plastic support with a bearing, which in this case isn't chrome-plated like the bar support bearing, but actually made from stainless steel. When the crop rises, if it is inside the pickup, at a certain point in this position, the tine pushes the crop up towards the inside of the strip, so that it is in front of the bearing. This forces the crop to move to one side or the other and wriggle out of passing to the rear side. Once it is in the rear, we've created plastic supports over which the crop slides so it doesn't become jammed or tangled. Thanks to this system, we have many fewer problems than with normal pickups. This is one of the patents we've taken out for a large number of countries because we believe it's a key point of our pickup. We can see that most components less than 3 millimeters thick in contact with the product are made of stainless steel. Even the metal fasteners, the small bolts, are in stainless steel. We pay a lot of attention to quality of components and materials because apart from design, there's no doubt that durability depends on the quality of materials. This is the cover plate I was discussing earlier. These 4 screws support the hydraulic motor. This 8-screw cover serves as mounting plate. Once these screws have been removed, the entire motor door can be taken out from this side. Another key point of the machine is the belt. The belt isn't just a detail. It's a feature that can enable the machine to operate without blockage problems. It would be easy to use an ordinary PVC or rubber belt, like other producers, and then, unfortunately, have to loosen the rollers from time to time to clean the inside of it. In our case, this never happens. The belt has a complex structure, since it has 2 toothed drive belts with teeth on both the inside and the outside, and all the components are mounted on these 2 drive belts. A 3-meter belt actually consists of 936 pieces. And this means it can be dismantled and inspected at any time. At this end of the belt, we have the hydraulic motor, connected to the gearbox with the 2 pulleys. Thanks to this belt, we can transport light products much more effectively, because we have not just this first level, which is the belt's first level, but we also have bars made of spring steel embedded in the rubber, which already provides some friction. There's a steel bar about every 30 centimeters, and at every 4th or 5th steel bar, there's a serrated steel bar. So, we have 4 height levels, able to transport very difficult crops like straw or very, very dry hay, which is basically weightless. Dry crops are difficult to transport. It's much easier to transport a much greener crop. The belt was designed like this not just to increase transport capability, but also to minimize maintenance costs. In fact, the two drive belts can be replaced. On an RT-1000, the lifetime of the belt overall may be from 20 to 25,000 hectares, depending on the crops processed, after which you only have to change the two side drive belts, so you remove all the screws and change the two drive belts. Another reason for this type of construction is that if a serrated bar is bent due to an accident, or one of the trap doors is cut, we only have to change the single piece, meaning the single bar, or just the plate. This really helps to greatly reduce maintenance and wear costs, especially costs due to accidents, which may well occur with so many working hours and so many hectares processed over the length of the season. In the most faraway countries, keeping a belt plate or bar in stock for safety will cover a very high percentage of the problems caused by accidents. Another special feature of the belt is that, as well as being constructed in segments, as we already described, when it's carrying a crop, the edge of the plate always presses on the bar, so it's completely closed. But during unloading, the edge of the trap door tends to open for a self-cleaning effect. This means that even if there's a small amount of dust inside, the belt tends to clean itself. The pressure against the conveyor bar of the spring steel bar embedded in the rubber of the trap door tends to be reduced as the belt turns, enabling the dust to fall down. Another very important point is that the various screws on the belt can be removed with an ordinary socket wrench. The screws, which have rectangular sockets, are held in place by a small U-shaped steel plate to stop them turning. So, any point can be dismantled with just a socket wrench, which also makes maintenance much, much quicker. The belt can be adjusted very easily. Unlike other belts, it doesn't require adjustment to keep it correctly positioned. You only have to check the belt tension occasionally. So, we don't have two tie rods, one at the rear and one at the front of the belt, as on other machines. We have one tie rod. Inside the belt, there's a parallelogram system that pushes both pulleys in the same way and with the same tension. Thanks to this tie rod and this spring, we know that the belt is correctly tensioned when this marker is level with the washer. So we can see at a glance whether or not the belt tension is correct. What's more, the tensioner pulleys at the bottom of each belt have two positions, so they can be shifted to the higher position when the belt becomes worn. This means that every belt can be used until it is absolutely worn out. We consider the maintenance cost of the various components as part of the cost of the machine. A lot of people think that when you buy a machine, you've already made the biggest outlay. They often forget that the machine has both an initial cost and a cost per 1,000 hectares. Many other machines may be even cheaper to purchase, but during use, over the years, you find out you are actually spending a lot more every year. Our machine requires fewer component replacements, and the maintenance it needs is much simpler. So in the end, it's a lot cheaper than many others. This machine is also very different from all the others because it has a unique suspension system that enables the pickups to adjust to variations in the terrain. But that's not all. Look at how it's built, too. First and foremost, instead of axles, we have very long, large-diameter tubes, which are chrome-plated, so they wear very slowly, unlike bushings, which may have to be replaced due to wear several times. Above all, a tube has much greater resistance to twisting and bending forces. So, with a tube of this length and such a long arm, a bushing tends to last much more. If we'd used axles, the amount of wear on the axle would have been much greater. We've always used a very long chrome-plated tube in all the main articulation points. What's more, the machine's articulation point where the suspension is mounted varies in height. At the headland, it's raised to pass over the swath. But during operation, to enable the pickup to adjust to variations in the terrain, it's lowered to a height where the articulation point is halfway up the pickup. This allows the pickups to move up and down. They don't move apart and always remain equally spaced, and this is really a great help. To do this, when at work, this tube descends to this height, and when turning, it is raised to pass over the swaths. Another detail worth noticing is that all articulated joints are industrial and not agricultural standard. We use articulated joints with case-hardened pivots in all points. What's more, in several points where the forces are highest, the cylinder end fitting is bolted. This allows easy maintenance and length adjustment, even after thousands and thousands of hours and wear. It also allows future maintenance costs to be reduced, because it is relatively inexpensive to change only the pivot and the end fitting, as with industrial machinery, but not normally in agricultural equipment. You can see that at several points, I don't know whether the zoom can show this, the code is marked on the piece, as for all the laser cut components, the rubber components, and the hydraulic hoses. This means that in most cases you don't even have to look at the parts manual, because often, as with the hydraulic hoses, the code is marked on the piece itself. Like the RT950 and the RT1220, the RT1000 is built to operate even with the side sections closed. In this case, with the RT1000, we can work with only the central section, with the central and right sections, or with the central and left sections. This is possible because in closed position, the sections are folded above the rear wheel, leaving space for the product to pass beside the wheel. This is very useful because if there's a post in the way, or if the space is too tight, we can lift up one section and keep on working without difficulty. Or if it rains after we've created the swaths and we have to turn them, we don't have to use all the pickups. We can just use the central one, straddling the path with the tractor and simply turning it over. The pickups automatically stop when in the closed position. Neither the pickup nor the belt runs, and there's much less wear. In this case, the suspension of the central section still operates because it consists of the central arms. But let's take a more detailed look at the various parts of the suspension. I'd like to talk about a rather unusual point, the other side of the pickup. In fact, this is a key point. Our machine is more complex and better built than the others. We haven't decided to use just 2 or 3 skids, or, like some companies, discs, like a disc mower, because in both cases, when you're working on wet ground, or first cutting alfalfa, the skids tend to pick up the soil and create ruts in the ground. This is one of the first problems. What's more, in a stony field, whenever the skid or disc hits a stone, it transfers the impact to the structure. And so it's unlikely these structures will last more than 5, 6, or 7,000 hours. So from the outset, we opted for a more industrial solution. In other words, a tandem structure with rubber wheels mounted on automotive bearings. The 2 rubber wheels themselves cushion some of the impact. What's more, the offset tandem arrangement always tends to adapt to the lie of the land. In fact, we have a spring suspension system between the two arms of the tandem. This oscillation enables the pickup to adapt to variations in the terrain by varying the heights of the two wheels, even at high speed. If the wheel were really to hit a stone, it would tend to bounce up, compressing the spring for a fraction of a second. This means that much less impact is transferred than with any rigid system. Apart from the wheels, there are also skids underneath the pickups. They are fitted higher up and are only there to protect the pickup if both wheels of the tandem end up in a hollow in the ground. These skids are in Hardock's wear plate, so they're fairly flexible to prevent transfer of any impact against a stone. So it's really very complex. Each tandem assembly is supported by a chrome-plated axle on which two tandem arms are mounted on bushings, protected by thrust washers with rubber lips. This means grease can escape, but dust can't get in. Instead of a solid bar, the axle consists of a thickly chrome-plated tubular bar, which will flex to a certain extent, especially in response to holes, stones, or humps when working at speed. All these features prevent the risk of machine failures. Now we come to one of the machine's fundamental points, the suspension. It's really crucial, especially at speeds of over 14 to 16 kilometers per hour. A mechanical suspension, as we've already seen in the tandem assemblies, with 4 wheels on each pickup, giving a total of 12 tandem-mounted wheels with spring suspension. This mechanical suspension works in association with the hydropneumatic suspension, with 9 cylinders providing suspension for the various pickup sections, plus 2 cylinders for suspension during on-road transport. Turning to the 9 cylinders, on each pickup section we have this cylinder for vertical suspension and lightning, and these 2 cylinders that damp tilting of the sections, like this. Thanks to this type of suspension, the pickups follow the lie of the land even on slopes, especially around ditches. In this case, the pickup concerned, without moving away from the other pickup, can either descend or tilt in either direction, in complete independence. This is possible thanks to these 2 cylinders, which are controlled together with this one by this valve connected to these 2 accumulators. So the machine has a total of 9 hydraulic cylinders and 5 accumulators, meaning 3 cylinders for each pickup. As well as these 9 cylinders, we also have these 2 other cylinders, which have 2 functions. These 2 cylinders lift the machine. So, when we reach the headland and have to turn, to avoid picking up and scattering the swath we've already created, the entire machine lifts up, leaving a clearance of about 1 meter underneath the chassis of the side pickups. This means we can pass over the swath and then descend again to get back to work. The second function is the one we mentioned before, suspension. When we're on the road, these cylinders are normally lowered to about 5 centimeters before the end of their stroke, and this 5 centimeters provides the suspension effect. This is very important because, unlike other machines which are rigid and cannot exceed 25 to 30 kilometers per hour, we are perfectly able to get up to 50 kilometers per hour in some countries because we use industrial axles, able to travel at 80 kilometers per hour with 4.5 tons. All points are oversized to rule out any problems. In our case, the merger doesn't limit the tractor's speed, as occurs with other machines. This is a benefit because in some countries transfers between fields are fundamental. You can't only consider the number of hectares processed per hour when you're in the field. You also have to consider the speed, ease, and possibility of moving the machine between fields quickly. What's more, the machine has a number of protective systems listed below, provided by these two valves. First, these two side cylinders have a dual function. Of course, the first is closure of the machine. The second is to break the whole pickup away if we were to accidentally hit a pole or tree when at work. In this case, even if the pickup may get some damage at the front, the cylinder collapses, acting as a safety cylinder, protecting the chassis from damage, because the entire pickup section breaks away. This is one of the 7 functions provided by these two valves. The other function, apart from the safety cylinder, is the pickup safety valve. When the pickup strikes an obstacle that affects more than half of the springs, beyond a certain force this valve activates, stopping the pickup before any of its parts are damaged. The third function is the belt safety valve. If the belt encounters an obstacle, the relief valve stops it before the drive belts break. If the belt cuts out due to a crop blockage, this can often be resolved by reversing the discharge direction to clear it out without having to remove the material by hand. The fourth function, on machines from the RT 870 upward, is provided by the accumulators fitted on the valves. In the case of the RT 1000, there are 6 of them. These accumulators allow the belts to be reversed without shocks to the pumps and motors due to pressure peaks, which may even cause failures over time. In this case, the pumps and motors are protected by these accumulators, which act as controlled taps. With this system, when the belts are reversed, they decelerate to a standstill, and the hydraulic oil flow direction is reversed to start and accelerate the belts in the other direction, cushioning the pressure shock. The fifth function is freewheel, allowing the pickup to be turned by hand in one direction. To change a spring or remove tangled string, for example. The sixth, very useful function is adjustment of the speed ratio between the belt and the pickup. Thanks to this valve, fitted on every pickup and standard on all machines, even on the front-mounted version, we can vary the amount of oil supplied to the pickup in relation to the belt rotation speed. Because, as we've already said, the machine is designed to operate from 650 RPM to 1000 RPM. So, of course, 650 RPM is a setting used for very dry, delicate crops. Speeds closer to 1000 RPM are more suitable for green crops, and in that case, if we were to keep supplying the same amount of oil to the pickup, the crop would tend to fly over the top. So we decrease the setting of this valve by 1, 2, or 3 turns to reduce the amount of oil, and thus the pickup speed, to ensure that the belt runs faster than the pickup. The final function, which is optional, is the belt switch-off function. There's a sensor on the wheel on the other side that detects rotation of the wheel support on which it is fitted, and when the machine is raised, it can automatically stop the belt while the pickup keeps turning. This belt switch-off function can also be obtained manually from the control box, regardless of the height of the machine. This can be fundamental in small fields because when we're turning on the headland, it means we can avoid keeping on discharging product on the outside or reforming a heap on the inside. Instead, we can hold all the crop on the belts as soon as we raise the machine and until we lower it again. Then, when we lower it, the belt starts discharging again, and this means we can interrupt swaths even 9 or 18 meters before the headland. The manual belt switch-off function can also be very useful when we want to pick up just a small amount of product in the corner of the field and avoid buildup in the discharge area. In this case, we stop the belt, the machine picks up the crop, and once we've turned the corner, we restart the belt and the machine starts discharging again. Or in fields where there are drainage ditches. When crossing the ends of the ditches on the headland, we keep picking up crop, but we stop the belt and then activate it again so that we don't discharge product into the ditch. Another very important feature of this function is that we can deactivate the floating function. All our machines operate with one of the 3 levers always in floating mode because from the RT950 upward, one lever closes the right pickup, one lever closes the left pickup, and the middle one is used to raise and lower the entire machine. In this case, if even just one pickup has to cross a ditch, we can disable the suspension float function by moving the lever, normally in floating mode, into the central position. The machine can even pass over the ditch without dipping down into it, so we can even pick up crop on headland ditches. We stop the belt, disable the floating function, cross the ditch, keep picking up, and once we're over it, we can reactivate the belt. This means we can really clean fields effectively. We've thought of more or less everything. We've now come to the end of our presentation. There are still many more details, which we'll be happy to explain and discuss with you at any time. However, before we say goodbye, we'd like to point out that during the last few years, we've also adopted an automatic timed greasing system. It greases 52 points in the RT1000, 62 in the 1220, 44 in the 870, or 38 in the 730. When machines are working 6 or 8 hours a day, it's best for them to lubricate themselves. So we've come up with a system that emits a small amount of grease every hour, lubricating the machine, especially in very hot areas where the grease tends to liquefy very easily. Thank you for your attention. We hope that this presentation has been useful and helped you to appreciate our product better. Thank you, and see you soon.